Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee Unlimited with J and D. If you're new here to this podcast, this is where Danielle and I share our stories of work and life and the messiness that comes between those two. And here we share our honest thoughts, our honest stories, in the hopes that maybe as you hear it, you can relate and also realize that you are probably doing better than you think. We like to keep it real here, and we're happy that you've joined us. For today's topic, we actually received a request. My friend Greg Eiler reached out on LinkedIn with a request for us to discuss how to find Zen in the workplace. And I was so happy that he reached out with that topic because with so much conversation about burnout and stress and mental health, I do think equipping people with tools and skills to find the peace and calm within the chaos of a workplace is really important to share. And we're really lucky because Danielle is someone who knows a lot about this topic. And so I do want to hand it over to Danielle. Danielle, maybe if you could just share a little bit about your background first. And even, when you and I met at Lululemon, you had a role that was kind of dedicated to this topic, which I thought was very progressive for the organization. But you've spent a lot of your life working on these skills. And so we're really lucky that you can talk about this today. So, Danielle, if you could share a bit about your background and then share with us how you coach people and help people find Zen in the workplace.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Janelle. And I love this question from Greg. I think we'll have a really rich conversation about it. In terms of my background, I started working with Deepak Chopra and the Chopra Center about 15 years ago. And it kind of fell into my lap. I was a yoga teacher. I was teaching a lot of yoga classes, and I felt this calling that I wanted to deepen my spiritual practice. It was fun
Mhm.
to be teaching the physical postures and having a whole bunch of people in my classes. But I was like, there's so much more to yoga than this physical practice. And I want to find somebody who I can connect with and who can help me grow in that space of spirituality. Then, shortly after that, Deepak Chopra, there was an opportunity to open the Chopra Yoga Centers in Canada. And so the investors asked me if I wanted to run the studio. Actually, they asked me if I wanted to just be a part of the studio. And I said, I only want to be a part of it if I'm managing it. So
Wow.
that'll be a conversation maybe for another time about just telling people what you want. And I wasn't
Hmm.
even exactly sure if that's what I wanted, but I just put it out there. And so I ended up connecting with Deepak Chopra and the other co founder of the Chopra Center, David Simon, in Toronto at their signature Ayurvedic retreat called Journey into Healing. And it was a week of meditation, a little bit of yoga practice. So it was really more focused on the spirituality, exactly what I was looking for. And so I started to work with them more closely, building the curriculum for the Chopra Yoga Centers. That's when I started to also, have a lot of the Lululemon crowd coming into my classes as well and supporting. And I became an ambassador for them. And after a few years, I was asked to come in and create the mindfulness department at Lululemon, which, as you said, was really progressive at that time. There weren't a lot of companies that were dedicated to wellness or even really talking about it. I don't even know if companies were talking about burnout back then. I mean, this is
Mm-mm.
10 years ago, 10 plus years ago now. And so, yeah, that's how, you and I got to meet. I remember that first offsite when I met you. I think I was leading yoga and meditation for that offsite up in the Grouse Grind.
At Grouse.
Grouse.
Yep.
I just remember
Yeah.
the Grouse Grind. I
Well,
just
who can
remember the
forget that?
hike.
Yeah, yeah. Who can forget that? But yes, then once you're at
Yes.
the top of the hike, then you have the kind of lodge, I guess, where we had the offsite.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
before you jump into the tools or maybe what you were going to share around mindfulness. I think it's so interesting that you made this shift because before coming to Lululemon, had you ever worked in a corporate work environment?
No, no.
Okay,
I
yeah.
mean, I remember interviewing, and they had initially had me interview for another role. So
Mm.
it wasn't a
Hmm.
role that was it was also a new role. It was about managing the global yoga program.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
So they had me come in, and I was taking a tour of the office space, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can work in an office. I mean, it's just that was one of my first
Right.
thoughts. And that office
Yeah.
is really cool, but still I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But then when this opportunity came up where they were really like create your own job title, job description, I was like, okay, this feels so much more aligned.
And then what did you do? So, if I paint the picture for the people listening, here's someone who, is knowledgeable, skilled in spirituality, yoga, mindfulness, and all that, hired to come into a very corporate setting and create mindfulness in the workplace, basically, something like that. And to your
Hmm.
point, it was a new role, so they were giving you some flexibility to design it. What did you do to, one, understand the needs of the workplace? Because having come from corporate, I know the environment of a corporate space, and I can quickly understand the stresses and the chaos that can come with a corporate work environment. So, what did you do to orient yourself to the reality of corporate, and then design a strategy per se around how do we create more mindfulness in the workplace? What walk us through that process?
This is so fun to think back to, yeah, 10 plus years ago. Like, how did that all unfold? So I wasn't employed as an employee in the corporate space, but I did consult before
Hmm.
coming into that role at Lululemon. And with the
Hmm.
Chopra Center too, we were also working on like wellness, corporate wellness programs. So I
Okay.
did have some idea and
Hmm.
leading some offsites too with Lululemon and some other organizations before coming into that full-time role. So I had a bit of an idea. But what I first did, my manager had sat me down and he said, look, Danielle, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, you wrote your own job description. So, what I would like you to do is just tell us what you think we need in terms of mindfulness.
Wow, that's really cool.
And so I just started to listen to people talk about their stress levels and just having these conversations with different employees throughout the organization. And one of the first things that I wanted to bring in was the practice of meditation. I felt like it was very accessible for pretty much anyone. And so we put that into onboarding. So every new employee was learning the benefits of mindfulness. They were learning the benefits of mindfulness, stress reduction, breathing, like simple breathing exercises. They were given a little mantra as well. And so they were able to, just on day one, start to regulate their nervous system. And then over the
Wow.
years, it was really cool to see that that program expanded into the distribution, fulfillment centers, into
Mhm.
retail as well. So it really did, and it was translated into our operating languages too. So it was really fun to see that growth.
Well, I certainly did not have a meditation practice before joining Lululemon, and I can attest on a personal level the impacts that meditation has made on my life. And so, for maybe those listening that don't have not experienced meditation or don't have any kind of meditation practice per se, how do you describe the benefits of meditation, and what are some accessible first steps for someone
Mhm.
who, and maybe because their organization doesn't have guided practices or anything, how could they get into it themselves?
Well, I love how accessible mainstream meditation is now. I mean, you don't even have to pay for any resources on YouTube. I
Mm.
know that there are so many audios out there. I mean, if you did want to have an app like Calm, that's also kind of
Hmm.
fun because it does like track your practice. And there's something definitely about gamifying a practice like that and keeping up with that habit, building that habit. So I think those are great resources out there. But I think one of the first benefits of meditation is the reduction of stress. So I don't like to say that meditation or even your yoga practice or journaling is going to take out all the stress in your life, but it is going to support you in dealing with the stress of your life a little better.
Mm,
It supports you in
wow. Yeah.
recovery. We're having a human experience. We're going to have our ups and downs. But when we have a regular meditation practice, those ups and downs are not as dramatic, right? So when you're on a high, you're like, okay, I'm on a high, but I'm not going to attach myself to this high because I know that there's also the low that's going to come too. And then when I'm at that low, I'm not going to identify myself with that low or attach to like, this is just rock bottom forever and ever, right? So there's a bit of equanimity in our mindset, in our being
Hmm.
when we have that regular practice.
And what is it about meditation specifically that helps people regulate their response to situations? So
Hmm.
you said that, there's still going to be things that happen in our life that stress us out. And I'll share my personal experience, but I'd love to
Yeah.
hear from you. Like, what is it that meditation does? How does it actually help us in our response to the stresses of life?
Well, meditation supports in activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's
Mm,
the opposite of our sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress response. And most of us are operating with low grade stress,
mm.
just having a job, driving to work or driving to the supermarket, just driving in general will elevate a little bit of stress. And so when we meditate, when we find those moments where we can just be, we're not doing anything, we're just either thinking a mantra or perhaps we're focused on our breath, we slowly start to regulate our nervous system. And something else that I appreciate too is that even in your meditation, when you have a lot of thoughts, you're not doing anything with them. It's such a
Mm.
powerful practice of non reaction. You're sitting there, you might be having all these thoughts. Maybe they're about work, the stress is at work, but you're starting to create a little bit of distance as you witness those thoughts rather than become and absorb those thoughts. Is
Wow.
that kind of making some
It does
sense?
make sense. It takes me back to a book that you had recommended, John Kabat-Zinn, Wherever You Go, There You Are.
Mm-hmm.
That book changed my life. And I remember it's a book that has a variety of different ways to practice meditation. And one of them, there were a couple of them in there. One was the waterfall method, where when you're sitting in meditation and I would imagine myself behind a waterfall. So I
Mm.
would picture myself sitting behind a waterfall. And when I had thoughts, I imagined they were in the waterfall going down and I could observe them. And it helped me create the space of here I am sitting, and there is my thought over there, and I am not my thought. The thought is actually in the water and it's separate from me and it's coming down in this waterfall. And it helped me just observe and really just see, oh, there's that thought again. And oh, there's that thought. And oh, how funny, I'm going there now. But to your point, I wasn't doing anything with the thoughts. I was
Mhm.
watching them go down the waterfall. So that one was a helpful one. And then a second one, and I don't know if it was in the book or if maybe I just learned this in some other meditation course, but it's the train metaphor.
Mm.
So imagining I'm at a train station. So I'm sitting there, my eyes are closed, I'm meditating. And then I take myself to a train station and I can picture the bench. I'm outside, there's a cover over me, and then there's the tracks in front, and trains are going by. And my thoughts are the trains. So if I have a thought, maybe it's, oh, I need to go grocery shopping later. So the thought goes by on the train and I'm still sitting at the train station. I don't jump on the train with the thought and go with it. So I
Mm-hmm.
really practiced letting that thought go by and then almost watching it go by and not continuing to dwell on the thought, not then making a shopping list, a grocery shopping list. That would be jumping on the train with the thought, I need to go grocery
Right.
shopping. That if I was started to make a list of groceries, that's me getting in the train and riding with the train. And so if I saw myself or felt myself starting to entertain the thought that I have to go grocery shopping, then I would recognize, oops, I just got on the train. I need to come back to the
Mm-hmm.
train station and I need to let that thought go by and actively let it pass. And so those were two tools that helped me um, recognize my thoughts, but also then calm down, and in that
Yeah.
meditative state. And then I know what I experienced because at Lululemon they had times of meditation throughout the day where you could go and practice meditation and they were silent, sitting in silence. And I remember sometimes, I think there was a 1:15. There was throughout the day you could go
Mm-hmm.
into remember that little studio where they would have the
Yes, the
meditations,
meditation room.
the
Mm-hmm.
meditation room. And I think I started to realize if I did the 1:15 meditation, so it was after lunch, after the morning, and then I started my afternoon with a meditation, and it was typically, I think, a 15-minute practice
Mm-hmm.
in silence. I felt so at ease when I left that room. And even if at the time I didn't know why, I didn't know the science behind the parasympathetic nervous system or anything like that, I just knew how I felt. I just
Mm-hmm.
knew I felt more calm. And then I noticed that my afternoons just had more ease in them, this feeling of ease. And so when I started to see the actual physical benefits of meditating, that's when I started to deepen it more and then get into yoga sessions and whatnot. But I think for me, some of the main benefits of a mindfulness practice were calming my nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Also, creating the habit or the tool of taking a deep breath or 3 deep breaths when something stressful occurred. Um, and 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 I learned those deep breaths in the meditation practices. And so let's say maybe it's a work day, and I didn't actually do a meditation that day, but maybe I'm in a meeting and someone says something that triggers me in some way. Maybe they are pushing back on an idea that I shared, and I'm starting to feel defensive and also starting to feel like I'm right and they're wrong. And I'm starting to get like my feathers all frilled up so that I'm in like attack mode. When I recognize that,
It's
what I
so
learned,
real and
it is.
relatable, right? Who doesn't feel like that in a meeting? Who hasn't ever
Who
experienced that?
hasn't felt that way? So before I learned mindfulness, I would go on the attack and I
Mm.
would keep attacking until it was proven that I was right and they were wrong. Since then, if I start to feel my defenses coming up, or I feel my face start to redden, or feel in my gut that I'm getting angry, I actually know that that's my time to stop and take
Mm-hmm.
3 long, slow breaths and then respond. And the response might still be um, trying to convince someone of something
Mm-hmm.
differently,
Mm-hmm.
but it has a different tone to it. It has a different intention because
Yes.
my intention isn't to be right. It's just to make sure that I articulate my point of view clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say that again. What I've learned is I become unattached to being right because that's the ego. And I learned in my meditation practice and also spirituality practices that the ego is a really powerful thing inside of me and everyone. So, me trying to be right is the ego. And I don't want the ego to be in charge. And so I still want to be a productive member of the workplace, and I still want to contribute to better decisions and all that. but it's not about being right. And my goal now is to just make sure that my point of view is articulated clearly so that whoever is
Mm-hmm.
making the final decision has my point of view to consider. And if I'm angry or frustrated, what I'm trying to say won't be clear. And also,
Right.
they might shut down listening to me because of
Mm-hmm.
who I'm being in the moment. Who I'm being is
Yes.
speaking more loudly than what I'm saying. And so they'll get defensive, and then it's just not productive. But if I
Right.
stay calm and simply and unattached, if I stay
Mm-hmm.
calm and unattached and simply have the goal of sharing my point of view clearly, and then letting go of that, like putting it on the train and letting it go
Yeah.
and not caring where the train ends up going, then I can be at peace and the whole meeting is more productive as
Mm-hmm.
well. And also, it assures that I'm bringing an energy to the room that is beneficial to the room and helpful to the room. And I'm not bringing the room down with defensiveness and anger and frustration and ego.
Right. I just love everything you shared, Janelle. And I wanted to highlight one of the things that you shared around when somebody says something, like just going back and somebody says something and triggers you, and you start to feel some heat, some redness, some reddening. And that is your meditation. That is the outcome of your meditation practice. So, just like you're an observer to your thoughts, whether it's the waterfall or the train, now you're putting your meditation practice actually in practice in real life when you're conversing with people, and you begin to become the observer of your emotions rather than being
Mm.
absolutely absorbed and consumed by that emotion and letting that emotion dictate your words. So I wanted to just highlight that is such an incredible outcome, a byproduct of a regular meditation practice, is that when you are in those situations, you are able to observe that emotion, not become it, take your 3 deep breaths, and articulate clearly what your perspective is to elevate that whole conversation.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And it didn't even occur to me. And that's, I think, the beauty of mindfulness, the skill of mindfulness is as you're building that strength or that muscle in yourself, it comes out in ways throughout your life that perhaps you're not even recognizing that that is your mindfulness practice in
Yes,
action. Yeah, but you're right.
absolutely.
I was observing my reaction and seeing it, and then that was my cue. Okay, take 3 slow breaths.
Right.
And then what is it that I want to say? And
Hmm.
and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, going back to this question around how to find Zen in the workplace, and everyone might interpret that question a bit differently and whatever it means to them. But let's say let's talk to the audience who does not have a current meditation practice. And
Hmm.
we already know that one thing they can start doing now is finding a meditation practice, whether through a free app or videos or going to classes, that are offered
Hmm.
online, workshops or classes that are in person. So teaching yourself how to meditate and teaching yourself mindfulness skills. That's one thing you can start doing now. But let's say they're in the workplace and they're feeling overwhelmed. So if we can all take ourselves back to a time where maybe let's use a specific scenario. Let's say that we're feeling a lot of deadlines and a lot of different projects in motion,
Hmm.
and there's deadlines. And then also maybe there's just this sense of a lot of change happening in the
Hmm.
workplace. And at any moment, you feel like the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath your feet. So that is a stressful scenario for a
Yeah.
lot of people. So let's take an example of someone is in that.
Hmm.
What could they do to find some version of Zen in the
Hmm.
midst of all of that, of all of the deadlines and work coming at them?
Hmm. Well, I think it starts with their mindset. And when you first shared this question with me, I was thinking about it and thinking about the mindset of not being your job. You are not your
Ooh,
job. Just the
yeah.
philosophy of you are not your job. And I know that's easier said, but a lot of people have that attachment to this is my role, this is my job. And when we have that sort of attachment, the rug does get pulled out from underneath us, right? I mean, the rug's going to get pulled out from underneath us. Things change and things happen to us at work, right, that are out of our control.
Hmm.
So if we are not attached to that identity of like, this is my entire life, my role, my self identity is consumed with my job, then when things like that happen, like whether it's deadlines or it's perhaps an org change where all of a sudden you have a new manager and new peers, or maybe you were a manager and now your new manager says, I don't think you're ready I don't think you should be leading teams. So now you don't have
Mm.
any more direct reports, right? Like these things occur in the workplace. And so if your mindset is, I am my job, then it's going to be more challenging for you to deal with those changes because changes are happening constantly, especially in the workplace. But if you identify yourself as someone who has a job, the job is paying the bills. And I'm not saying you can't have a job that you absolutely love, but you want to have a life outside of that job. So I would say right now, look at how much you identify yourself with your job. Then
Mm.
start to see, okay, are all of my friends at work? Or do I actually have people who I connect with who are not part of my workplace? And then perhaps there's hobbies or like a community that you want to join, whether it's the gym or a yoga or meditation community or something like that. Or maybe even it's a side hustle or you consult a little bit too. So you don't have all of your energy into that one place. I mean, we all
Hmm.
have this like, 38, 40-hour work week, but most likely, most people are energetically spending, 24 hours of the day thinking about that job. So if
Yeah.
you can start to remove yourself, if you're noticing that, wow, like even when I'm not at work, I'm just like only thinking about work. I just want to talk about work all the time. Get a hobby or get another job. Even if it doesn't pay anything,
Get,
but maybe
get a
it's just like,
hobby.
yeah, you're doing something else. So you could just try to get your attention to avert from that one thing. Because if you are, like, let's say you're a mom, a stay-at-home mom, and all of your energy is just to your child all the time. But think about like the stress level of that mom. Anything happens to that child, or they don't have their afternoon nap or something, and then they're like, "Oh my God, my whole day is ruined." But if this mom has some other friends, an activity, a slow girls run club or something that my friend Sydney has up in Vancouver, just
Little girls.
something where she has a community and people who she can relate to that's like not part of that identity, it's going to help that person move through, those shifts, those ups and downs.
That makes a lot of sense to me. In fact, I was just talking to a friend about this very thing this morning, how to successfully transition from work to home at the end of the
Mm.
workday
Mm-hmm.
and how to shut off. And it is way easier said than done. And it's something that many people need to figure out how to not make work their whole life,
Yeah.
because then it becomes their identity for sure. And you become attached to succeeding in this role and you put all these expectations. Um, that makes a lot of sense to me. Something that you said triggered something for me where I was reflecting back on times where I felt overwhelmed in the workplace or just very stressed. And I think what I needed to do in the moment, or now in hindsight, what I've done is try to find out or dig to the core reason why I felt stressed. Like what were the thoughts going on in my head or the
Mm-hmm.
beliefs in my head that were causing that situation to feel stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it was, I think, this identity of my job and needing to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And also there was I think an underlying fear. And then it was about for me, it's about getting to what was the fear. So when I felt like I had a lot of balls I was juggling in the air, I had a fear of dropping the ball somewhere. And and in my mind, I wasn't allowed to drop any balls. And I don't think that my boss put that on me. I don't think that I actually and the balls included family balls too. So it was
Mm-hmm.
work and family and life. So in my mind, I had, 30 different balls. I felt like I was juggling with no end in sight. And I was so worried about dropping one of the balls and letting someone down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in hindsight now, I realize I was putting it on me that if I dropped a ball, that meant that I was letting someone down. And in reality, I don't know if it was going to let anybody down. I
Mm-hmm.
think I made myself believe that dropping a ball, quote unquote, dropping a ball was going to let someone down. And I just don't think that that was true. And so I created this situation where it was high stress, but it was self-created, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
because of a fear of letting people down. So the
Mm-hmm.
underlying fear. So in fact, in my own therapy with the therapist, I worked on this fear of letting people down. And
Mm-hmm.
I think because of that work, I also have a lot more ease in my jobs that I've had
Yeah.
since then because I addressed that fear. So I would say to someone who feels like they are stressed at work, overwhelmed, and need to find Zen, there's the path of finding the tools to regulate your nervous system and find calm and find peace. That's a path that everyone should
Mm-hmm.
be taking. And then there's also this kind of deep introspection of what are my underlying fears, my individual underlying fears that are causing this situation to be stressful. Does
I
that make
love that.
sense?
Absolutely. I think that is such a wonderful inquiry. I want to know from you, Janelle, if let's say you did let somebody down. Let's just say
Mm-hmm.
hypothetically, okay, you drop a ball, you let somebody down.
Yeah.
Then what? Like,
Yeah. So, because I can use an example, and you probably remember this at Van City when I kept making my daughter late to her practice. Do you remember that?
yes, I
I think I
do.
was crying in a meeting.
I wanted to give you a big hug. Before you
Yeah.
started crying, I was like, "Oh, okay. This is really important to Janelle." I could just feel when you were
You could
sharing
sense
that.
my
Was it
energy.
Layla?
Yeah.
She was,
It was Sophia.
oh, Sophia. Okay.
That one was Sophia specifically because she
Yeah.
had the softball practices and I was late getting her there. And then I
Mm-hmm.
come to find out every time she was late, she was kind of like in trouble, like punished. And so then I felt extremely guilty because one, it wasn't even her fault at all that she was late. She was ready to go, waiting for me, and I
Yeah.
was late getting home to then get her in the car to take her to softball practice. So it was absolutely not her fault at all, and she was being punished. And so then there was this one specific day I was driving, and she kept looking at the time, and because she hadn't told me before that this was the case, that every time she's late, she has to, I think, run extra or something. I don't know. Her playing time would be reduced in the next game too.
Mm-hmm.
So her playing time was going to be
Mm-hmm.
affected. So then she finally told me that, and this wave of guilt went over me. And then that was where I literally felt like I was dropping the ball. And I felt so shameful and so guilty because it was affecting her. And
Mm-hmm.
she didn't complain about it per se. Like she wasn't mad about it. It was just a matter of fact thing. Like, oh, I'm probably not going to
Yeah.
get to start, in the next game. I probably won't get to play. And I felt so bad. So okay, so that happens. So let's say, how might I approach that differently? Because as you remember, my reaction, I think I just went into a spiral of shame that night. I dropped her off and I felt so guilty. I was resentful of work. I was mad at myself for prioritizing like meetings that were running to the end of the day. And I think I
Mhm.
probably, the meetings went long, which then made me come late. But then I was like, telling myself, well, I'm the one who allowed the meeting to go long. There was
Mhm.
just this whole chain reaction of blame on myself that then just, really affected me. And so you saw me the next day, and I had this point where I said, something has to change. I need to prioritize my family. I feel like I'm letting them down. I'm going to need, you're going to probably see less of me at work because I just need to make sure that by 3 o'clock I start heading home. And I kind of laid it out. So I made a plan, if you
Yeah.
remember, and I intentionally shared it with everybody because it was a team meeting.
Mhm.
And I intentionally shared it with everybody so that everyone could be in it with me,
Yeah.
and could help me in this, in adjusting how I was spending my day. And so that's how I approached it. But I'm curious, like, Danielle, if that was you, if you were in my situation, what might you have done? Or how might you have looked at it?
Well, I kind of want to go back to, what you had just shared. And I think that there are balls that weigh more than others. And I
Mm,
think you recognize that that ball that you were trying to juggle with your family had more weight. It
mhm.
as it
And
should,
more
right?
importance. Yeah.
Yeah, it should carry more importance. And so I don't know if I would have handled anything differently. I mean, it's an important role that we play of being mothers, but it isn't our entire identity as well. But I
Hmm.
thought when you had shared, it was actually even, it wasn't just our team meeting, it was our org meeting.
That's
I
right.
think
There
you
was a
had
lot
the
of
whole
people.
org, right?
Yes,
And I
I
do want
think
to
I did.
say for people who are listening right now that this is when you were the head of HR, you were the head
Hmm.
of equity and people. And when you shared that and you said, okay, you're going to see less of me and I'm going to need your support, it created this ripple effect of everyone else. I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me and then some of the other of my peers who I spoke with, we were also looking at our own lives and our priorities and the balls that we were juggling, being like, okay, what am I missing out on? And how can I prioritize what's important to me while still maintaining, the day-to-day functions of my job? So I
Mm.
thought that was super inspiring. And, I hope that I know you are at the top of the org, but I hope that anyone feels like they can talk to their manager if they do have multiple deadlines and they just have so much on their plate that they can feel safe enough to say, hey, something proactively before they drop a ball to say
Mm.
like I can't handle all this. I'm doing the job because so often people are doing the job of somebody else as well, like they're picking up
Yeah.
the slack of
Yeah.
other work. And so to be able to communicate that proactively and say, I'm not going to be able to make these deadlines. Like there's just that
Hmm.
is not going to happen. So I think that's where regular one-on-ones are so helpful too, so that you have the space to be able to share with your leader.
Well, I think this
Um,
is a good one to end on because what we've done here is come back to the role a leader plays in
mhm.
creating the conditions where every individual on a team can ask for what they need or adjust to find their own peace or zen in the workplace
Yes, yes.
because it's a whole village. When you work in a workplace, you can make choices for yourself, but there's also a greater context within which you're making your choices. There's a greater culture. There is a greater responsibility to each other and greater broader agreements or commitments on how you work.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if leaders set the culture of a team to where it is safe to say, hey, I've got a lot that I'm juggling right now. This is unsustainable, and I need to make some changes. And then the leader can then support in whatever way makes sense. But then also team members, if you could have an honest conversation with your peers, your greater team, because at any given point, typically a team consists of individuals at different stages in their life and different seasons of life. So some might be in the season of young children. Some
Mm-hmm.
might be in the season of, they don't have any kids and they're just out of college. And some are in the season of aging parents. And some are in the season of growing their career and being very career focused. So every team typically has a mix. And within that mix, there are different levels of time and energy that you can give. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I had young kids, my amount of energy as a human was reduced. But now, as my kids are older and they're very self-sufficient, I have a lot more energy to give.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could go back to my younger self when I was trying to do it all and not asking for help,
Yeah.
if I could go back to that time, I would do things differently. I would ask for help. And ideally, those who were not in that same season would help me. And they
Mm-hmm.
could take on some of my meetings that maybe I need to miss or want to miss, or maybe they could take on some follow-ups with other people in the organization for me so that I could then pick up my kid from daycare on time.
Right.
If I use that example, I remember there were times where I was late picking my kids up from daycare because I was trying to do it all and get all this stuff done
Mm-hmm.
before 6 o'clock or whatever. And so if I had just asked someone who had this time and the bandwidth to do it for me, then I could have been there earlier. So it's about being in it together and
Mm-hmm.
creating the conditions of empathy and creating the culture where you don't have to do it all and that you
Yeah.
can make choices to prioritize the things that are most important at that time in your life.
I so appreciate that. I mean, I know we want to end this, and I feel like we can go on and talk about this for hours and hours, but the last thing I wanted to share was that book, Essentialism, that you brought into
Yeah.
our team meeting at Van City with Greg, written by Greg McEwen. And I just, I remember reading it previously, and then we read it together again. And I so appreciated that concept of priority. It's not a plural word. It wasn't originally plural. We've just made it plural.
Yeah.
And
It
so
was
I think
probably Americans that made it plural too.
exactly right.
Americans said, you know what? We can have multiple priorities. And
I
they changed
know.
the essence of the word where priority was always meant to be singular. You have one priority at any given time.
Exactly.
And
And I
then
think
someone had the idea, you can have 10 priorities.
it's just like that's how we have this culture of busyness. And I think that if
Mhm.
leaders can really focus on prioritizing the work, so it's just one project and not multiple going on, then
Mhm.
it'll just start to bring a little bit more zen into the culture
Mhm.
of the workplace.
Or what else? If we go a little further, let's say maybe there is a list of projects that a team is doing,
Hmm.
but everyone is clear this is the number one priority. So that if
Right.
you're going to have a ball, quote unquote, drop,
Yeah,
it's okay to drop the number five ball, because
exactly.
it's not as important. And
Right.
so you have almost the permission to drop it because everybody is clear that this other ball is more
Hmm.
important. And without that clarity, if a leader isn't clarifying and force ranking your projects in order of importance,
Yeah.
if the team doesn't have that forced ranking, then everything is important, and then they don't feel that they can let any balls drop because
Hmm.
everything is weighted equally. Your metaphor of some balls are heavier or more weighted than others. I heard a similar one. My friend Kate Rocheron said that imagine that you're juggling balls, but imagine some balls are made of glass and some are made of plastic. So the glass ones, you don't want to drop because they're going to break. The plastic ones, they can fall. And that's the same idea, that just if you at least take the time to ask yourself which ones are glass, and then you know that you're going to prioritize those and you make decisions based on prioritizing those, it makes life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love
Yeah.
this conversation, Janelle.
Me
And I want
too.
to
That was a
thank
good one. And
Greg
Greg
for,
Eiler,
right?
thank you for the suggestion on LinkedIn. If anybody else has something that they want to hear us discuss openly and honestly, just let us know either on our Instagram channel, Coffee Unlimited
With J&D.
J&D,
Yes.
or find us on LinkedIn and let us know, as we love to have suggestions.
I love this. Well, thank you, Janelle. And make sure if you are watching this video, you hit subscribe or you follow us on any of the podcast platforms. We'll be dropping new episodes every Wednesday to get you through that hump of the week.
Yes.
I'll see you next week.
See you next time, Danielle.